Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Today, we delve into a pressing matter concerning the First Amendment rights of North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Anita Earls. Justice Earls, one of only two Democrats on the state's highest court, is currently embroiled in a legal battle with the North Carolina Judicial Standards Commission. She asserts that her critical comments about the state's judicial system, comments rooted in the belief that public confidence is best built through an open dialogue, are being unfairly targeted. Well, we're going to explore the implications of this case, the broader context of free speech within the judicial system, and its potential impact on the integrity of our courts. We welcome to the discussion Carmen Daugherty, Deputy Executive Director at the Advancement Project, and she's going to help us shed some light on this crucial issue. Carmen, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Stacey.
Well, we appreciate it. So first and foremost, can you provide some background on this situation in North Carolina, well, really on the North Carolina Judicial Standards Commission and its role in overseeing the conduct of judges?
Sure. So, North Carolina, they elect their judges. That's one flag that people should be aware of. So it can become highly partisan during election seasons. And I say this because some of the candidates who ran to be judge have made comments, including the Chief Justice Newby when running for office, and when Justice Earls was running for office, made comments about her affiliation to the party and calling her another AOC on the bench. So that should have been a flag for a commission, a standards commission, but of course nothing happened to him. So the Judicial Standards Commission is a body that is tasked with ensuring the integrity of the court. They have the power to investigate anonymous complaints. Most complaints are anonymous about judges, from the Supreme Court to the District Court to the Court of Appeals. So their job is to investigate these complaints and make findings and recommendations in this case, to the Supreme Court Justice for Newby, the Chief Judge, to make a decision around recommended consequences for what Justice Earls has said.
Yeah, and just Carmen, if you will, just if you can just give our viewers kind of an idea of what exactly Justice Earls' alleged transgression here.
Definitely. I mean, it comes down to her just speaking the truth about the makeup of our judiciaries, not only in North Carolina, but across the country. And really, she said there is a lack of diversity. When she comes into the courtroom, there are no Black attorneys arguing before her. I think the number is 90% are white attorneys who argue in front of the Supreme Court justices there. There are no Black law clerks, and a lack of diversity across the whole judiciary system. And she talked about how this can lead to implicit bias, right? And this notion that we have these biases that play out and make a system more inequitable for those in front of it because there is no representation on that bench. So she stated something that has been researched extensively across the country, has been agreed upon by judges across the country, yet North Carolina's Standards of Ethics Commission feels like, let's not investigate the real root issue of lack of bias and discrimination in the courtroom, but let's focus on the words that came out of her mouth, which were the truth. I will add another piece that she talked about was gender, right? How she is one of few women, right? And making comments about how she feels as a Black woman in her position. So, that's part of it too.
Yeah, and things seem to have heated up too, because I noticed where federal Judge William Osteen criticized the justice, as well as the Judicial Standards Commission in their last hearing for inflammatory language that was the judge felt was in the court filings. This has gotten ugly, but it seems, Carmen, too, that while it's a big issue down south, it should be a big issue across the country, it still have not received much attention. But this is a First Amendment issue too, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's what she's saying, right? Judges have First Amendment rights as well as the rest of us. We all adhere to the Constitution, including judges. So basically focusing on the idea that the words out of her mouth are inflammatory versus rooted in the truth, are some sort of for her she's saying it's a violation of her rights to be able to speak her truth, right? Which is absolutely true and supported by case law.
And what code of judicial conduct that the commission claims that she violated with her comments, because she spoke only facts, apparently.
Right. So, the complaint is rooted in one of the standards around making unsubstantiated comments about her colleagues that would point to them having a bias in the system, and that would ruin the integrity and the public trust in the Supreme Court, which is true, right? Those are the facts. Like, you look at surveys and look at where we are in America, where we are with our national Supreme Court. There is a total mistrust of these bodies that are meant to serve us and protect our rights, and which are failing across the country, from voting rights to police accountability. All of it is laying at the court's feet right now.
Yeah, and Justice Earl, she emphasized the importance, I think you've articulated well, bringing to light these imperfections and unfairness in our political and our judicial system, our judicial and political system, I should say in this case. How do you view this assertion in the context of maintaining public confidence in the judiciary? I mean, if she's not allowed to speak what is, obvious to the naked eye, then how can you have confidence in the judicial system?
It's such a strategy right now that we're seeing across the country with Republicans, right? This is a Republican-ran judiciary. It has a chilling effect to point out the only Black woman, one of, I believe, 3 in the history of North Carolina, to try to silence her of the truths she's trying to show to the rest of the country. I think the piece here, too, is that she didn't point out any particular justice and say, hey, you said this racist thing. No, she's showing the system, which we know is not perfect, pointing out the inequities and the lack of diversity, and how that affects decisions on the court. And so instead of a commission, if you heard that a commission was investigating, my first reaction would be, oh, great, they're finally looking into the lack of diversity and bias. But no, instead, they're like, well, let's focus on the Black woman's words, right? Which seems, and let's attack the Black woman, which is a pattern in our country. I could point to other examples, like in Georgia with the prosecutor Fannie Willis, right, being attacked as well. The Black man in Mississippi who can't run his city because, white Republicans are trying to stop him from doing that. So it's really just a systemic issue in our country.
Yeah, we're seeing an all-out. We've talked about this on this program before. We've had guests talk about it. We're seeing an all-out assault on people of color and women, and the justice system here. We know, particularly for people of color, what the justice system has represented over the years. And now you have this justice speaking out, speaking the truth, and they're seeking, at the very least, to silence her.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, the chief judge, a white man who is in now, who defeated a Black woman previously, who was the chief judge, the previous chief judge, when she left, she created a commission to study these very things, the bias, the lack of diversity. And Justice Newby, the white Republican Chief Justice, disbanded that, right? And I believe 2 years ago, and said, we're not going to do that. No explanation, but we all know why, right? And now here we have Justice Earls talking about the need and the lack of representation and how it affects all of the system. And this is a person who's a civil rights, she has a civil rights legacy. She has fought for our rights, voting rights, housing rights. Her history is rich in protecting civil rights. So this is someone who knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, and obviously the Advancement Project is bringing all these issues to the fore, letting people know what's going on. How have the residents, the citizens of North Carolina, how they reacted to this? Are you seeing any groundswell of folks looking to either protest or expressing their disappointment in this or dismay with this?
Absolutely. What's beautiful with Advancement Project, our model is to partner with grassroots groups in the states. We make sure we understand what's happening in people's backyards and how we can be an ally and engage in supporting folks. So we've had quite a few conversations with organizers on the ground, Black leaders on the ground to say, what do you need? What's happening? And the amount of support they have received both locally and nationally, it is a groundswell. Right, people are starting to know who Justice Earls is, understanding who they voted for, and understanding what's happening to her for speaking the truths that our communities have faced for eons. So it's wonderful. People, as soon as they heard about this, have started coming out, writing op-eds, writing letters, sign on, right? And so I think we're going to see mobilization and things happening as this case progresses, right? It is very early. We're still waiting on a judgment, on a preliminary injunction right now to see if something could be stopped immediately, this investigation. So I feel like once that decision is made, you'll see more movement on the ground.
So what's at stake here other than the aforementioned when it comes to the Justice Earls and her career? What's at stake? What's laid on the line for us? What's at stake?
Sure. So the commission, the Ethical Standards Commission will make, if the investigation goes on, we're asking for it to stop now because it's a sham. If it moves forward and they investigate, which they rarely do, if it moves forward and they decide that her comments were so inflammatory, it violated several of their codes around the integrity of the court, they make a recommendation to Chief Justice Newby. And their recommendation could be, a slap on the hand, up to a removal from her position. So this Chief Justice has the power to remove her for these comments. And we don't want to see that, obviously, right? But it also has a chilling effect for other local Black electeds in that state, because who knows what's going to happen the next day or the next term when a Republican legislature decides, oh, we can get the bench. Let's see who else we can target right now. So, it may seem like a small piece of this, but it's so important that we have a civil rights leader in her position to hear the cases that are so pivotal right now, from voting rights to housing, that are coming down in North Carolina. And I believe the Republicans in that state know that and are trying to remove her for these very reasons.
Wow. And so, this whole conversation really has served to highlight something that I'm going to ask you to underscore, which is the importance of paying attention to whether they're appointed or elected judges.
That's right. Absolutely, right? Folks, being an elected judge puts you out there pretty early on, stating your position, stating your history, but also, a lot of these decisions are going to be made once you're sitting on the bench, and now your opinion is out there already. So it's a tricky place to be an elected judge when you're trying to be non-partial, equitable, right? But you have to have a position when you run for an elected position. So it's a tricky situation, and Advancement Project doesn't have a stance on elected versus appointed. I personally, through research, would definitely want systems to move to an appointed system of elections. Just there's more accountability there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again with the judge addressing these biases, these issues. Talk about how that could contribute to a fair and impartial judicial system.
Absolutely. So, Stacey, when you have folks who come upon the court with issues, let's say a voting rights issue, which is pretty hot in North Carolina, and the issues around gerrymandering, right? Ensuring that communities are fully represented in their state legislature, and you have a panel of all white judges, they don't see it the same way. They say, well, you have one elected official, that's enough. But it doesn't really account for that full rich community and what the census say and the numbers say. They think that one Black person representing thousands, hundreds of thousands of people is good enough for us, when white communities have several elected officials representing them. And that's, a very elementary, breakdown of gerrymandering. But in essence, when you have folks that look like us on the bench who really understand the importance of having that right to vote because it's been denied to us for centuries, and understanding the importance of having an elected official that looks like us and fully represents our interests, it changes the discourse. It changes the types of questions judges ask from the bench. It changes what cases are brought. People become confident to know, my civil rights will be heard and defended when I have people that look like me on the bench and have backgrounds in civil rights law.
Carmen, have you noticed other justices, not just in North Carolina, but around the country, have they weighed in on this? Have Justice Earl, does she have, does the justice have a support system or the support of other judges nationwide?
I believe, it's again one of those tricky situations where judges, is having a chilling effect, right, across the country. So judges on benches who haven't spoken about diversity maybe aren't coming forward right now for fear of how get other states getting ideas, opponents to this idea could start coming out and filing complaints to their systems. I think retired judges are more able to speak freely on these matters and seen as, in a nonpartisan, non-political way, just talking about this idea of racial bias. There have been plenty of judges who have spoken in academic circles around the lack of diversity in the judiciary. So I believe those folks would be willing to come forward and talk about, like, these are just the facts. This isn't about politics. It's just the reality of our judicial system. But I will say the civil rights community has come out for Justice Earls. We know what's at stake with the possibility of her being removed in a state that's so important like North Carolina.
Yeah, well, the commission also, they previously investigated Justice Earls over allegations of disclosing confidential information. Can you explain the significance of that allegation and how it relates to the broader responsibilities and the conduct expected of judges?
Sure. I mean, the complaint that was from last March about disclosing some administrative information, right? Something it seems of minutia importance. However, the commission investigated and closed that pretty immediately, right? They didn't find any wrongdoing. They basically are like, just watch what you say in public circles. They dropped it. However, with this most recent complaint, they said, let's investigate Justice Earl's recent comments around lack of diversity and implicit bias, and then let's reopen that other thing we already closed. So they're piling on again, right? It definitely seems like a target, like attack of her at this point, right? They're trying to get at her from any angle, even bringing up past things that they have opened and closed.
Right. And what steps does it seem that could be taken to strike a balance between safeguarding the integrity and impartiality of the court while also allowing judges to engage in meaningful discourse on matters of public concern like this? Because this is a matter of what this justice said is a matter of public concern.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important that the judiciary has flexibility to create committees to study issues like this around racial bias, which they did, right? And that was taken away as soon as you got a new administration in. So, I think you have to put this a little bit on the state bodies, the state legislatures, to care enough to want to look at the issue of racial and implicit bias in the judiciary and make some recommendations based off of what they have seen in North Carolina. Because, with the makeup of the court now, they're not going to look into this, right? The makeup of the commission, which, some folks are appointed by the judiciary and the state legislature and the governor, they're not going to look into this, right? That's just not what they were put in those positions to do. So until you have a body in there that's willing to really look at the lack of racial diversity, really understand the racial makeup of their courts, it's going to keep happening. But you have brave people like Justice Earls who's willing to talk about what she sees on a daily basis.
Yeah, and Carmen, tie this into, if you will, the broader mission of the Advancement Project and advocating for a more inclusive and equitable justice system?
Absolutely. We're a multi-generational, multinational civil rights organization that is focused on empowering grassroots movements and ensuring that Black and Brown communities can succeed. We do that through organizing, communication support, and litigation legal support. We look at, we're called in by states who really want to change laws, feel like there is a civil rights violation, will come in and litigate in partnership with those groups. So, this goes into the broader idea of racial justice, right? We're working across the country on racial justice issues that affect our communities, around voting, police accountability, the school to prison pipeline. So understanding decisions that come from the courts is huge, and how it has a chilling effect on some of those advocacy efforts in those three categories that I named. So we really want to ensure that the partners we work with understand the makeup of their judiciary and how to really move cases in those particular states.
Yeah, have the Advancement Project or any of its partners, have you taken a peek as to what's if any changes or reforms that are in the pipeline that perhaps can strike that balance that we need in preserving the integrity of the judiciary and safeguarding judges' ability to engage in meaningful public discourse?
It's absolutely been hard, but not impossible, right? We've seen a lot of progress at the local district levels, right? I will point out some of the wins from our Opportunity to Learn, our school to prison pipeline work, right? Grassroots partners have worked really hard to change legislation at the local level around cops in schools and removing them from schools. And then that will get dismissed by either the state legislature or the state courts, right? So we see changes in the local piece where people who are most impacted and most connected can see progress. But once you start filtering out and getting further away from the issue, that's when folks are like, you don't need that change. We're good the way we are, and then change it back. So we're working with partners across the country to figure out how do we switch that, right? To ensure that change is made at the local level, that folks at the state, either the state legislature or state courts, know that this is the will of the people. And this is what they said they wanted for their communities. And you really should respect and honor that.
Yeah, and just let me throw this out there, because Judge Earls said that she doesn't believe that the biases she pointed out are conscious or intentional, but that's becoming more and more difficult to really believe. I mean, I'm not calling the judge, by any means. I'm not, going against the judge here, but it's becoming more and more difficult for people of color to believe that this is not done intentionally.
Absolutely. I think, from a attorney standpoint, from a justice standpoint, until you see a decision that's like, because I am racist, I am deciding this way, right? Then that doesn't meet that, bias, like more than explicit bias, right? I think that's what she's saying. Mm-hmm. We all see it, right? In these decisions, whether it's voting rights, other decisions, that the impact of whether implicit or explicit, it affects us, and it's affecting Black people more than white people. And that's the bottom line. And these decisions are inequitable. And it's hard to call it anything else than just explicit bias and racism.
And finally, Carmen, what's next? What should we look for next in this particular case?
Definitely. So we're waiting to hear a preliminary decision in Justice Earls' case, because she has sued the commission. And once that decision is made, then the commission will either continue its investigation or end its investigation. But it doesn't stop there, right? If the investigation continues, she could get removed from the bench. But we have to keep lifting her up. And I think our communities need to know who Justice Earls is. She's a civil rights fighter. She's been fighting for our rights for decades. And she knows what's at stake when we leave these decisions to an all-white judiciary. So we need to support her, lift up her name in our circles, and not let the commission or the state body think that we're not paying attention.
Is there any reason to be optimistic here?
I think so. I mean, I guess I always have an inkling of optimism, right? I think she has a strong case with the First Amendment piece. Like, she does have a right to say these things. There is plenty of case law that shows judges can make comments. She did not call out any of her colleagues. So I think there is hope there. I think, and at the same time, it has, I mean, she's galvanized people. She has really lit a fire under folks to talk about these issues more, right? I feel like we're talking about justices more and more in the last year, whether the Supreme Court of America coming down to state courts like North Carolina, really knowing how powerful these folks are and how important it is to have diversity and representation.
And finally, how can folks assist or contribute to helping the advancement project in the various causes you take up?
Absolutely. We love to be lifted up on social media. Our website is advancementproject.org. It has all our latest information, our campaigns that we're involved in, and how to contribute to the movement, right? We are a no holds bar organization, right? We will fight where we are needed. So, we're always looking to get involved in the movement, and we're always looking for support. So check out our website, advancementproject.org.
Carmen Daugherty, the Deputy Executive Director at the Advancement Project. We thank you so much for joining the Black Press of America's Let It Be Known. Really appreciate it.
Much appreciated, Stacey. Thank you.
Thank you.